Do you know, I almost messaged you and said, can we delay today and not chat? And it's not because I didn't want to talk to you, because I always love talking to you, but I was in the flow of other things, and I have my to-do list that I feel like I know at the end of each day that I'm getting stuff done, but I feel like that there are a lot of things that are still sort of lingering that I really want to nail. And I was kind of in this flow, and I had secretly put on the Robbie Williams documentary in the background while I was editing. And it is so compelling, honestly. I was like, do I just message Melinda? And you know what? I was like, no, because it's so important to commit to creativity and conversation. And it's so important to commit to that time. And I felt that actually that is exactly what we want to talk about today, isn't it? And,
That showing up, doing the work. If you said you're going to do it, then you do it.
yeah. Because there's such a fanciful element to creativity. We talked about this in our last episode where, the dream of sitting in your studio and just painting your days away, or, there's such that romanticism. But actually the reality is, as with anything else, it's work. And particularly when you feel like that you and desire and need to have maybe financial results from it. There's this commitment of saying, okay, for this half an hour or this hour of this part of the day, this is what I'm committed to, whether you feel like it or not. I don't know how you feel, because I know that you do your writing. Are you disciplined like that with your writing?
Yeah, I am. I know that is how Remember trusted me to come through me, because I have for most of my motherhood. At that point, it was 19 years. Written in a journal. Like, I have hundreds of notebooks, and I don't just have one that I use every day. Like, I'll just pick up whichever one is near me and I'll just write in it. And so when I had the overwhelming feeling that Remember needed to come through me it was like July 8th. I remember the day. It was this overwhelming feeling of I need to write, and I'd never had it that strongly before. I often feel like I need to sit and write and it will come through me. But on this day, it was even more heightened. And I actually it was a different form of writing for me. So I was almost I feel like it was almost like a little manic state of, I grabbed all of these notebooks, like in this cupboard is like full of my little library, and there's notebooks in it. And I grabbed all these notebooks out, and they're from years, like they span years of my life. And I was just flicking through it, and I would read a paragraph or I'd read a page, and I had a Word document open, and it wasn't really me writing. It was just like coming through me, like these words were just like coming through me. And when I started telling people how I wrote Remember, or I was publishing a book, people were like, oh, that's nice. How did you write it so quickly? Or, oh, really? Like, how can you write a book that quickly? When in fact, it had been a 19-year discipline.
Yeah.
I'd never even dreamed of writing a book.
Yeah.
It wasn't on my vision board. It wasn't on a wish list. I wasn't manifesting it. It wasn't in my anything.
Yeah.
And I know if I hadn't have been that disciplined, like writing for me is quite healing, like I've mentioned, like it's very expansive for me. And I know if I hadn't have shown up on those pages for all of those years, I couldn't have created Remember.
No.
I couldn't. It wouldn't have come through me. The words wouldn't have been there. The wisdom, the insight, it wouldn't have flowed through.
No.
Like on the days that I was writing in those journals or making notes, there was never I thought of a book. It was just what was happening on that day. It was just flowing out of me.
Yeah.
And when you show up, you do the work, you build that trust, something magical happens then in what is created either from that, from that process, or it's like you build this trust up with your creativity.
Yes.
That it knows it's got a safe space to flow through you.
Yeah. It's a partnership.
It's a relationship.
Yeah. It is. Yeah, it absolutely is. It's about giving yourself permission to open the floodgates and trust that there will be things that will come out. It may surprise you, or what comes out you might recognize, or you might question. And I think I agree. I think that's so interesting. Ed Sheeran, he was criticized for, I can't remember the name of the song, that he wrote it in 15 minutes or something.
Yeah.
And, it's the same process for us, isn't it, in taking photographs as well?
Yeah.
Because when we take a photograph, sometimes it's literally 1/2000th of a second.
Yeah.
And yet we pull and draw from everything within to be able to create that. In relative terms, it's very similar. And so I think that's so interesting that, like you say, for 19 years, you consistently showed up. And it's very much like my book as well, because I consistently showed up for my knowledge, for my understanding of photography, for the process of creating and actually reflecting on the things that I had learned. I rarely take anything for granted. I always go that extra layer beneath in what I'm seeing and what I'm doing. And so therefore, when it came down, I wrote my book in about 3 or 4 months, and absolutely the same as you. I had that. It was a Tuesday. I would go and I organized. I had Adeline was 1 at the time, and we didn't necessarily. I was at home at the time. I could have easily not put her into nursery, but I decided that it was important for me to have this as for me. So I put her in. It came out of my budget for that day, and I worked on my book. And I, like you find your ways, don't you? You find I went to a certain cafe where nobody really knew me. So it was busy. So there was noise. Funnily enough, I'm no good at working in silence. Like, don't take me to a library where it's like super quiet, because, like, joking aside, the noises in my head, the voices and the sensations and like everything. That's why, again, I have to, when I'm editing or something, I have to have like a movie on in the background or something, because that sort of subconscious or the conscious brain has to have something to focus on, to allow the subconscious brain or part of my brain to flow. And absolutely. So that's exactly how I did it. And it's really interesting. I think the reason why we chose to discuss this particular topic is we see it so often on social media and through conversations about creatives having blocks. They bring up questions about, why me? What should I do? How should I do it? I don't know. I don't have time. There's lots of excuses. There's lots of barriers. How we show up and how we create. And at the end of the day, it really is. It's almost like saying, well, this is a job. This is, whether it is providing you an income, and whether it's a job that you do every day, 5 days a week, or whether it's one day for an hour. It's that commitment to just sitting there, and if you come away with nothing or one thing, or you don't need to produce vast quantities. I remember being in one of my classes at college, and the teacher said, in previous days, in analog days, documentary photographers, who work for years on stories, that they would be, if they went to somewhere to document for the day, and they came away with one strong photograph, to them it was a good day.
Yeah.
Because they'd shown up, they'd stayed with the story, they'd spent time listening, they'd spent time observing, they were delving deeper and deeper and deeper. And sometimes that is all you come away with, but it's something. It's the next step.
And I also think in that process, sometimes you're going to walk away with seemingly nothing.
Yeah, 100%.
But it's so much bigger than just producing a piece of writing or a photograph, or it's nurturing ourselves as well.
Yeah.
And the process and the learning and just being in that space of, like we talked about, curiosity and honing and refining our voice and our eye.
Yeah.
Because if you don't show up and do the work, it's in the action steps that you understand your voice and you understand your gaze and you understand what you're creating.
Yeah.
Because it's through that experimenting and playing and creating shit art, or creating that one, like you said, that one photo, that you understand what you create.
Yeah. Yeah.
And how you can build on that, or how you can refine it or change it or understand it a bit better, or there's so many layers to it.
Yeah. I'd actually like to talk to you about that saying, because it fascinates me, that go make bad art or make bad art. Because for me, I look back at my work over the years, and yes, there's a lot of bad stuff in there.
Yeah.
But it was never with the intention on making bad art. It was always the intention of making good art and making beautiful things. And I think that there is, because it's become such a common phrase, almost like a let off the hook phrase of go make bad art, that actually I wonder whether the actual reality has been lost a little bit, in the fact that what we're actually trying to do is make good art.
Yes.
But it's okay to sometimes not come out with the results that you're happy with, that basically answered the questions you had or anything. And it's okay to experiment, and it's okay to do something over and over. And yeah, absolutely. So I'd love to know what you think, because it's always like, when I hear someone say it, I'm like, am I the only one that actually is confused by this?
I 1,000% agree. Often I'll think, I want to make this picture, or I have a thought in mind or a feeling in mind, or I'll go in, take my camera, and I try not to have too much expectation.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, I just want it to, we'll just see what happens. But there is definitely that question or that feeling or emotion or something that I want to capture. And it's the same with my writing. And when I say make shit art, it's more in the fact of when you come away and you look at the photos and you're like, that is not what I wanted.
Yes.
That is the opposite of what I wanted.
Yeah.
And I'm disappointed and I'm a little bit heartbroken because I was so strong in what I wanted to create.
Yeah.
I know my camera. I know what I'm looking at. Why didn't it translate?
Yeah.
And accept that on that day, you made shit art.
Yeah.
And it's the same with my writing. Sometimes I'll write like a newsletter or a blog post and I'm going, this is the message. This is what I'm writing about. This is whatever. And I'll read it and be like, that totally falls flat, or that isn't the message I wanted. It's frustrating, disappointing. And I have to just kind of go, okay, well, it's not the best.
Yeah.
I've shown up.
Yeah.
I've still done it. I can see where it needs to be changed or edited or just completely thrown in the bin. And in that way, you have to accept that sometimes it's going to be shit.
Yeah.
And I try not to get too down on myself because I have whole periods of. So recently I've bought a few film cameras. And I hate every photo that I've taken.
That's so interesting you say that.
It is all shit. It has cost me a fortune because film is expensive. Developing and scanning is ludicrous.
Yeah.
And, so when I was a kid, and even when we first got married, and up until Tom, who's now 18, I had a film camera.
Yeah.
And I have actually got a suitcase under this cupboard full thousands of printed photos.
And probably not bad.
Yeah, I love them. They're good. I've used digital since. Well, I've got photos of Tom when he was 3 on film. So 15 years. And now I've got back and I've bought myself a couple of film cameras. And I'm like, I've got this. I love those photos that I've already got. How hard can it be? Well,
I went through exactly this a couple of weeks ago. I spent, if you think about the film and then the processing, and then it was like $150. And I've put a new film in, like $20 odd, and Adeline, my gorgeous girl, who is so creative and so curious, like I've got it there sitting and I've put it in, and she came up to me and she showed it to me and she'd opened the back and she was like, Mum, look. And I was like, and I actually trapped her finger and she was like crying because I was like upset, or not upset, but my reaction was so like, close it. I was like, I don't know why I was bothering because she'd had it open for like 2 minutes, but I actually hadn't taken any pictures on it at that point. But it's so funny. And I absolutely 100% agree. I was like, this is going to be fine. I can take pictures. I know what I'm doing. And I spent $150, and there are probably 2 pictures that are even vaguely like worthy. I was so excited when I was going around my garden and I was getting close up to flowers, and I'm going to have this in the foreground and that. They are just worse than terrible. Like, honest to goodness, they are awful. And now I'm like, I've got that fear on. I'm like, I don't want to spend another $150 on a whole bunch of awful. Like, I cannot actually afford it.
I've in that cupboard, I've literally got a bag. There's 520 mil films, and I think 6 or 7 35s. And I'm like, that's going to be like over $200.
Yeah.
And I'm petrified to get them developed because I'm like, Are there going to be any that I like?
Yeah.
Like Tom, my 18-year-old, he grabs the little point and shoot. Anyway, he took a photo and he looked at the back of it and he goes, "Oh, I'm like, dude, it's a film. It's not digital." Oh.
You have to wait. You have to
Hey,
pay money and then you have to wait.
oh God, just use your phone.
Oh, but it's so funny, isn't it? Because again, it's that reminder that you can't assume because you've got this set of skills that you're actually going to be any good at that. You have to show up and you have to try and you have to fail. And actually, I always, whenever I get interviewed or whenever I'm having a conversation with anyone, there's a question: how did you get into photography? And for me, I was really interested in it when I was younger, maybe about 8 or 9. I wanted to be a National Geographic photographer, and then I had a little bit of interest at school. I played around in the darkroom, but that's because I spent all my time in the art block, and it was part of that. And then I went to art college at 18, and I still had this dream of doing photography, but it was analog, and I, at that stage in my life, couldn't afford to make the mistakes. I couldn't afford to go through the process, take the pictures, develop, and the actual financial cost that was associated with that. And it wasn't until digital came out that actually I could start affording the mistakes. And I think that's such an interesting, and actually I was when we said, oh, what should we talk about? And we said, let's talk about the showing up and doing the work. I remembered the Henri Cartier-Bresson quote: your first 10,000 photographs are your worst. And there's a big part of me that actually feels like, because of the transference of analog, where because it actually costs to take each frame, I think that there is a greater commitment to that learning process early on. Whereas with digital, I never ever say that digital's free, like in terms of frame, because obviously there's a frame count on your camera and you have to charge your batteries and yada. Like there's always cost. It's fraction in comparison, obviously. So I'm like, for me, it's with digital photographers, your first like 100,000 images are your worst. Like, do you know what I mean? I think it's like exaggerated, and again, it's not necessarily your worst, but they're your learning period of understanding who you are. And again, there's the showing up, doing the work, continually committing to the process. I believe it's not just the movement forward, but the reflection back. Because how can you ever understand the way you're seeing the world and the types of images you're creating if you're not reflecting back on them? And if you're constantly, okay, this is who I am, I'm going to post on Instagram, and then I'm going to look at other people's work and I'm going to post on Instagram, and I'm only ever going to look back at the last like 12 or 24 images that are in my feed currently. Scroll back, get them out, print them, get them out into your life and sit with them. That is that's as much part of doing the work as it is the actual taking of the pictures.
Absolutely. And that's what I've said that to a few of my ladies that we've been in mentoring sessions with. Like, have you actually gone through your Lightroom? Like, go back.
Yeah.
Go back and see what you've created.
Yeah.
Go back and see when you've shown up. Go back and see why you've shown up. Like, where you've done the work.
Yeah. And where you've been happy and where you haven't.
Yeah.
There are...
like you've made shit art.
Yeah. Absolutely. And there were, I look back at sessions. I have this big thing about I never really love white space in my images. And I think it's, for me, I feel that life is so packed with color and vision. And when you look around the world, there are no white spaces. There's no white sky. There's no, so for me, I want wall to wall something.
Yeah.
And so, and it was one of my big things when I was shooting in the desert, where, sometimes the sun was so strong. To get the right exposure on the people, you had to like wide out the sky basically, and you lost all the detail.
Yeah.
And for me, so it was a real and I look back at some of those sessions that I did when I was in the Middle East, and as much as I love the connection and the story of the people and the relationships, there was an awful lot about the color, about the composition, about the whiteout that it leaves me feeling a bit empty. And I never want that emptiness to be a question in my imagery.
It's the thing of showing up. Like, that now.
Yeah. 100%.
You know that is not part of your voice.
Yeah.
And you only get that by showing up and going, okay, so take that out because I'm not doing that again.
Yeah. 100%. I mean, it's fine in black and white. It's a different thing.
Yeah.
But, I'm talking about color imagery, and absolutely. And it's one of those things that the process of showing up every day, you start finding your own shortcuts.
Yeah.
Right? You start finding your own, because you go, okay, for me, I know that a lot of people love backlit images, but I actually feel really uncomfortable with them because I don't love editing them, and I don't love the results. And I think it's that whiteout that you sometimes get if you're not careful. Yeah. And so I know that when I'm shooting, I will do some backlit, but my focus won't be that. It will be something else. And I think that is what, when you show up on a daily basis, you get that muscle memory. When you first learn to drive, you get in the car and you go mirror, signal, maneuver. Like now you get in the car and you do it automatically, so you don't actually think about it. It's only because you've done it like hundreds and hundreds and thousands of times. Mm-hmm. And it's exactly the same with creativity.
Absolutely. And it gives you more depth to be more creative.
100%.
Because you know your voice, what you can explore, and it asks you to ask more questions of yourself.
Yeah. It allows you, because your brain is free of the worrying, the mirror, signal, maneuver.
Yeah.
You get in and you're like, okay, where am I going? Is it raining? Can I wind the window down? Have I got a coffee? Have I got time to get a coffee? Like, you can think about in the gap. All the gap. You're closing the gap and then opening the gap. Closing the gap and then opening it. It's like that. Again, it's that expansion and opening yourself up to all the things that you want to be able to achieve, and not having to worry about the things that are just process driven, essentially.
And I think too, it also comes back to, like we spoke about in the last episode, that discomfort, because it is some days, like you said, you don't want to show up.
No.
And it's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But you still show up and you do it.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And on those days, sometimes those days are the best days.
Yeah.
Because you're like, I don't want to be here. I don't want to be doing this, but I'm doing it. And
get your trainers on, go for the run.
Yes.
I have to keep telling, well, I'm not doing that, but I need to do that.
That's it. Show up, do the work, see what happens.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And I don't think it's a consistency thing. I think it's a discipline thing.
It's 100% discipline.
Yeah.
You look at musicians, actors, anyone that are doing something successfully, and it's all driven by discipline.
That went really quick. That felt quicker than half an hour today.
Yeah, that did. Yeah, it did. Good.